I think I broke his fucking neck.
I think he broke his fucking neck.
I told you I broke his fucking neck.
Talking about Willis.
Welcome to the 70s versus the 80s. This is Wolfman Mike, and I'm back without a co-host again. Jimmy Dynamite had a family deal, and Awesome Augie is on assignment. But I am joined by a great guest today. I've wanted to have him for a while. It's John from Pro Football Journal. We're going to talk some Super Bowl. We're going to talk some longest yard. Let's get into it, shall we? So today we are joined by John from Pro Football Journal. He's joining us from front row, the Super Bowl press row. I guess. How you doing today, John?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Excellent. And so we're going to get into, we're going to be talking the longest yard here. We're going to be talking about John's experience as he's down there at the press row at the Super Bowl. But before we talk football, I had one other question for you. I opened up the show playing Sister Christian, a 1983 song from Night Ranger. Are you familiar with that song, John?
I am.
So I'm going to play you another song. It's another sister song, and the idea is we have to choose a sister. So let me know if you are familiar with this song, John.
Well, I tried to make it Sunday, but I got so damn depressed.
Yeah, it's America, I believe.
Yep.
I don't remember the title.
So it is Sister Golden Hair.
Okay, I would have never gotten that.
So yeah, I started out with Sister Christian, and that's Sister Golden Hair. So I guess I kind of already know your answer already. If you were forced to banish one song and just banish one song forever and just listen to the other one, which one would you choose? Which sister would you choose?
I like Sister Christian. It's an okay song. It's from the 80s, and I'm a little more familiar. It at least has some guitars in it that are electrified.
Yeah, I think I'm going to vote the same way as you. I know that Sister Golden Hair. It was the producer was the fifth Beatle. I forget his name now. Is it George Martin? I think. So it's kind of got that Beatles song sound to it. And I really like America a lot. I'll put their 5 greatest songs against anybody's 5 best songs. But yeah, something about that Sister Christian was just it's kind of a novelty song, but something made it popular, and it's got something magic to it. So I agree with you. I think I would choose that song. But we're not here to talk music. We're here to talk. It is Super Bowl week, and I got John here from Pro Football Journal down there at the press row down there in Arizona. What is the scene down there, John?
Well, on Fridays, it's the busiest day for Radio Row, but all week has been very busy, and it just gets busier as the week rolls on. For those not familiar, Radio Row started in the early 90s, and radio stations will come from all over the nation and set up tables in an area designated by the NFL, and celebrities and football players will come through and do interviews. And they'll have producers that are just grabbing players. Hey, do you have a moment? Can you come on our show? And then there will be handlers and entourages that will say yes or no. So it can be kind of a meat market in a way. So that happens a lot, and I've been part of that for quite a long time.
Excellent. So are you at liberty to say who have you met at the meat market this year? Have you, any big names that we would know?
Well, I was working with a couple of people. One of them was Jake Plummer, and another was Rondé Barber yesterday, and David Tyree the day before. But there were a lot of people I wasn't working with. Deion Sanders came through, Carl Eller, Hall of Famer for the Vikings. You name it, there were people coming through. It would just, it's an exhaustive list. You would just turn around and there would be somebody that you knew. Rookies that are prospects of the draft would come in, on and on.
You've been doing this for years now. How do you see the trend? Is there any trends with the coverage of the Super Bowl? I mean, now there's a lot of bloggers, a lot of, I guess media just gets bigger and bigger every year. Is it any other trends you've been seeing that how the Super Bowl's been evolving over the years? Well,
you mentioned bloggers. The height of Radio Row was probably 1999 through maybe 2012. And then COVID hit in, of course, 2021. I've noticed fewer radio stations are coming. A lot of the big ones don't come, but podcasts are everywhere. The NFL is granting media passes to them, whereas maybe 8-9 years ago they wouldn't even be granted. So you should apply next year and come to Vegas.
I might have to do that. That's what.
You could set up your podcast. You could have a wrangler and try to get interviews. A lot of times, Carl Eller might be there. There might be other Vikings, and you could just focus on what you do. It's a good time.
Excellent. I'll have to check that out. How have the events been? I know I actually was down in Arizona for the one Super Bowl, the famous Eli Manning beating the undefeated Patriots Super Bowl. And there was I went to a free Counting Crows concert the night before, and then they had fireworks that went on for it seemed like a half hour. It was just like a grand finale. And I was thinking, geez, I think the NFL kind of has some money. How has there been have you been to any of the events this week down there? Has anything impressed you at all?
I have. I was at NFL Honors last night when there were people everywhere. There was a red carpet introduction where the media was allowed on the outside of the red carpet, and the football players and their dates or wives and also celebrities would walk in their fancy clothes and things I couldn't afford. Maybe you can. Just spectacularly dressed. And the MVP was announced, the Defensive Player of the Year and all those awards. And also the Hall of Fame class of 2023 was announced. And there's been various other things as well. You mentioned free concerts. One of my favorite Super Bowls was in Tampa, where it seemed like there was a concert. There was a concert almost on every block, almost every night. One time I saw Cheap Trick on one night, and then I was walking down a street, and I looked around, and there was and no judgment involved. I was looking around, and I said, man, This is a great concert. I couldn't see who was on stage. I said, this kind of looks like a Katie Lang concert. And sure enough, it was a Katie Lang concert. And it was just wonderful.
Wow. Yeah, that's like I said. I think the NFL kind of has a little bit of money to throw around, and they do a great, fantastic job with all those extracurricular activities and stuff that they have. Is there anything else we wanted to cover about down there this week?
Well, I'll be glad to share anything, but it's just a good time. I would always recommend somebody doing it once in their lifetime, at least, if it's close to them and you find a place to stay and you can kind of travel around and see the events. There's always lots of... Sometimes the cities will put on parties as well. It's not just the NFL. Sometimes they're the ones that are hiring the bands, and lots of fireworks. And if you like food... and you can afford $18 hot dogs and $21 pulled pork sandwiches, it's the place for you. Pepsis are about $8.
Well, that's actually not too bad. I know at some of the stadiums now, Pepsis are going for probably around $9, $10. So let's talk a little the longest yard.
Burt Reynolds, the electricity that turns on the most outrageous team in football. The Mean Machine, supercharged and power-driven to the longest yard. Burt Reynolds, the quarterback who will tackle anything.
Driver's license. Yeah, look what we got here, a miniature cop.
So I just want to play that to prove that, yes, we are talking about the 1974 longest yard, not the 2005 longest yard. What do you think of when you hear that trailer, John? What's the first thing that comes to your mind?
Well, it reminds me of when I got to go see it. I was only 11 years old, and it, of course, was a pretty rough movie. But my dad took my brother and me to it, and I had seen in 1970 Patton at the theater, which was the first time I remember going to a theater, and
Wow.
it had some harsh language in it. The reason he took us was because his brother, my Uncle James, was in Patton's Third Army, and it covered a lot of the things and the battles that he was involved in. But then the next movie that was rough, it was an R rating, was The Longest Yard, and he took us to that. So I think we had seen the trailer, and for some reason, he took an 11-year-old to, and my brother was 16, to The Longest Yard.
Well, I mean, I seen you talk about your first movie. I can remember seeing Rocky when I was 6, and I think that was my first movie, and I thought that was kind of rough. But now it's really tame when you look back today, and that's kind of funny because I was putting down in the notes here. I was looking at the with IMDb, their parental guidelines. It's kind of funny that you said you went there and you're that young. And I was just going to see if you agreed with these parental guidelines for sex and nudity. IMDb says it's mild. Violence and gore, they have moderate. Profanity is moderate. I'm not so sure about that one. And then they have alcohol, drugs, and smoking mild. And then frightening and intense scenes mild. Do you kind of agree with those ratings by IMDb, or what do you think?
Well, I actually do, especially by today's standards. I don't remember excessive cursing. I think for a prison movie, I think it was not excessively violent. A lot of stuff was implied. I think the only drinking involved was, I think they made some sort of raisin hooch or something that they kept in the bathroom.
Pruno or something, yeah.
And implied use of maybe some steroids or some greenies or some bennies to enhance performance, but it wasn't obvious. It was more suggested. I think it was pretty mild when you watch it now. I think the modern version was much more over the top compared to the 1974 version.
Yeah, I agree with you. I was like, I was kind of laughing at their parental guidelines, and then I went back and watched the movie, and I go, they're actually pretty close. It's a lot more moderate than I thought. I just remembered the whole movie taking place in a prison, and so I thought it was going to be more violence and stuff. And I remember I too watched it on TV because I wasn't old enough to go to the theater. I remember watching TV, and I thought it was more intense when Caretaker gets burned up in the jail cell, but they really don't show much of it. So yeah, I think it is pretty mild and stuff. I know, John, you wanted to talk about. So this is Burt Reynolds, of course. This is kind of his big breakout role. I think Deliverance was his first role, like in 1972, I believe that was, and then 2 years later he gets his own movie here. But you kind of wanted to talk about the movie was full of a lot of football stars. What can you kind of tell me about them?
Well, a lot of football players. I think what's interesting is there were only a few stars, but there were several players that a lot of people wouldn't even recognize. The biggest star was Reynold, who was one of the guards, who was cruel to the inmates, and Joe Kapp was a pretty big star. And then the third guard was Mike Henry, who was actually pretty friendly at the very end and told Paul Crewe that he played a good game. A lot of folks don't know that he was a football player for the Steelers and the Rams, and he was Tarzan. So he had a good acting career, and he played Tarzan in a lot of roles. And then he also played with Burt Reynolds in Smokey and the Bandit. He was kind of the ne'er-do-well village idiot son of Jackie Gleason in that movie. So that was the same guy as one of the guards.
Oh, I remember his son. That was him, huh? Wow.
Yeah, that's the same guy.
I would have never put those two together.
Yeah,
Wow.
Mike Henry. And he had, if you look him up on IMDb, you'll see that he had a lot of roles. He had a good, solid post-football acting career. Also in the movie, in inmate roles, there was a Dino Washington, and Ernie Wheelwright was a solid running back. Jim Nicholson, I don't know how much he got credited in it, but he was a tall tackle for the Kansas City Chiefs. He started a little bit. There was a receiver named Ray Ogden for the Falcons. You can find football cards of some of these guys. There was a gentleman named Purvis Atkins who did a lot of the talking when Paul Crewe, the Burt Reynolds character, was trying to recruit the African American players. You know, they needed speed, and that was kind of a stereotype. Those are things that maybe you could get away with now, but that was just kind of the way it was. The white guys couldn't run. We have to get some team speed. So naturally go to the black players, and then I thought it was handled really well. The black players said, "We're not gonna play for the man." It was during a time where black players felt like they might have been exploited, and it was kind of an interesting little scene. And the actor who did the most of the talking was Purvis Atkins. And then there was what I thought was kind of an insensitive scene that by today's standards, where Sonny Sixkiller was the Native American athlete. He was a quarterback for the University of Washington. He was in the Rams camp in 1973, and he said he had served at Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State College? No, prison. So there was a couple of insensitive jokes going on with that one that I don't think you could get away with today, nor should you.
So excellent. Yeah, I didn't realize like Mike Henry and them. I didn't know Purvis Atkins. I guess I didn't even think of them as being football players. I thought they were just actors, and they did a really good job in the movie. One of my favorite actors in the movie was Richard Kiel, who played Samson, the really tall. He was like a tall, I don't know, like a child, like the biggest guy out there, but he had like a childlike personality. And he played Jaws on the James Bond movies. I'm not a big James Bond guy, but I do remember that he had the Jaws roles on the James Bond. So he had some of my favorite scenes where he gets his nose broken and he insists that the other guy apologize, and then
You broke my fucking nose! You bastard! You broke my fucking nose!
Calm down, Samson. Calm down. I'm gonna fix it for you, all right?
Hey, I don't want to play this game. You broke my nose.
I'm gonna fix it, okay?
How does it look?
Oh, it looks 100% better, doesn't it?
100%?
Oh, yeah.
It does?
Yeah.
Yo, he did that on purpose.
No, he didn't.
Yes, he did.
Tell him you're sorry. Please.
I'm sorry.
Okay, everybody, huddle up, let's go.
He said he was sorry.
Bullshit.
Come on, let's
Said he
huddle
was
up. Let's
sorry.
go. Let's huddle up. Let's go. Come on, go.
and then I was looking for the sound clip where on the TV edit where he does the clothesline, and he says, I on TV when I was a kid and I'd watch it. Like I said, I wasn't old enough to see it in the theaters, and they always said I broke his freaking neck, and I thought that was funnier than the actual F-bomb that they said in the actual movie, but I couldn't find that sound clip with the TV edited at all. But I think it's a hilarious scene either way.
Well, and that's the only reason now, or then probably, that it got the R rating. There used to be specific rules by the MPAA, and if the F word appeared twice, it would get an R rating, even if it was considered fairly mild. So that's why it would be considered R rated. And now in most movies, you'll get the F bomb within the first 5 minutes of a prison movie.
Yeah, and they said the F-bomb, like in that scene with the clothesline scene, they said it like 4 times in a row. So it's like that was kind of the joke of the scene. So where do you think this ranks as Burt Reynolds' his movies? Where would you rank it?
I would rank it fairly high. I was never a Burt Reynolds fan, but I think he was really good in Deliverance. I think this was really good. As you move, I did not like the Smokey and the Bandit series, and I did not like Cannonball Run. I liked Sharky's Machine, which is one of the underrated films of his.
Yep.
So he's not a favorite, but I think he was really good. I liked him on the Gunsmoke series. I thought he played a good character there where he got his start. I think he's a very good comedic actor. I just sometimes didn't think he got a lot of great roles. I thought Hooper was pretty good.
Yeah, and I thought in this movie, I mean, I guess I was watching a documentary on it, and they said the movie was supposed to be more serious, but like Burt's personality I think he was just perfect in this role because I'm a huge Adam Sandler fan, but the 2005 remake didn't do it for me. I thought Burt was just more of a smart ass, or where Adam Sandler's more of a comedic actor, but Burt could do it both ways. He could be the dramatic football player, or I don't know, he was just funny without trying to be funny, and I thought he really added a ton to the role. And like you said, Smokey and the Bandit, he'd go on, that was kind of his big vehicle, pardon the pun, but that was kind of like his, where he got ultra famous, and that was just kind of like you're just hanging out with Burt Reynolds. There wasn't much of a plot there, let's face it. He's just driving around in a you're just hanging out with Burt Reynolds in a Trans Am. So I thought this was like, I thought this could have been where his career could have gone, where he could have done these roles where he's kind of a half drama, dramedy, half comedy, half drama. So I think it's my favorite role by him in any movie. I mean, he was good in Deliverance. I mean, that was kind of more of an ensemble piece, and that movie's kind of a little hard to be rewatchable and stuff, but
I agree with you. I think this was a perfect role, and those were the few I told you that I liked, and this one has to rank right up there for the reasons you state. He's that kind of wise guy athlete, and I think a lot of us know people that were like him. And if it goes over the top, a character goes way over, it ruins the movie. And with Adam Sandler, it just didn't work on a couple of levels. One is the kind of comedy he did, and the other part is he didn't fit athletically. Burt Reynolds played college ball, and he has a frame that looks like he could play football. He's a big guy, and he could say stuff in a way that was funny without trying to be obvious, and it was fairly serious but had humorous points. So I think it holds up well. Not only that, it was made as a movie in a period where they had a lot of realism. That's just something like that was just kind of done at the time. There was not a lot of super special effects, and there wasn't a lot of things that they were trying to make it really fake. The actor that was in Bullet was always big into, Steve McQueen was always big into realism. He just wanted it to be like you were watching real life. And that's kind of like what The Longest Yard was like. It was not overhyped, not overproduced. It was looking as real as you could make a movie look.
Producer was Albert S. Ruddy. And kind of why I got into rewatching this movie is I watched The Offer on Paramount. I don't know if you've seen that, but it's an 8-part series about the making of The Godfather, and they kind of incorporated a lot of the Godfather scenes into it. But what I didn't know about him is he left. He didn't do Godfather 2. He's like, I'm going to go do this football movie with a football player gets put in jail, and they're like, what? That sounds ridiculous. Why don't you do Godfather 2? And he's like, nope, I'm leaving to do this movie. And I can really see his influence in it. I think it was a smart choice going into this movie.
Yeah, I would say so. Honestly, I'm not much of a movie buff in terms of those types of things, directors and producers. But I do remember that story, that it was somebody who came over turned down a chance to do Godfather 2, coming over from the first one. And you can just tell that this is not just some cheesy football movie like so many of them were. This is a serious looking and acted film.
Yeah, I was unaware, I don't know, if, at least from the documentary I watched, Burt Reynolds said he was calling plays, and then the camera was just following him like it was a real football game. He was like, so they didn't know what play was coming or whatever. And in that one scene where he throws the long bomb, he actually threw. There was no stuntman. They were doing so. He actually threw that long pass that was completed and stuff. And and some of the play calling, I know you're a football aficionado. It kind of made me laugh. Like they do the drop kick. Why to get 3 points? Why wouldn't they just line up for an extra or a field goal? I mean, but why would you have to surprise the defense? And then the ref, I like that. He goes, I haven't seen that in 35 years. And I go, well, yeah, because it doesn't make sense. Why wouldn't you just kick? Why do you have to catch the defense off guard to score 3 points? Why don't you just line them? Do you remember that scene? Do you think the same thing?
Yeah, I do. That was maybe a little bit unrealistic. I think that was probably just kind of thrown in there as a novelty, just to show that they were more prepared than the so-called semi-pro team. And you mentioned the play calling and how it looked. It just seemed more realistic. For quite a few years recently, I've coached semi-pro football and called plays and was working with athletes that are kind of on that level. They were really good guys. They played in the Air Force, or were in the Air Force, or they had played a little bit of college ball, or could have gone to college had they not gone into the Air Force, or they were local stars who couldn't go to college for various reasons. And it doesn't look slick. It doesn't look perfect. There's going to be times where there's a blown coverage. There's going to be times when there are mistakes. But sometimes it could look really good. When you look at football movies, especially in the 80s and then in the 90s, it just looks fake. It doesn't look real. The hits and the soundtrack that goes with the hits, it's just not realistic. NFL football doesn't have the kind of hits they show in movies. When you look at the second iteration of The Longest Yard and these guys running a long way and then just getting clocked, people would be in the hospital. It's just not realistic. And in the first Longest Yard, it's close to what football looks like on that level, in my opinion.
Yeah, so I know you're pretty much an expert on. You're always pointing out football plays on your Twitter feed and such. What football movie do you think was the most choreographed, the best, the most realistic in play action?
This would be up there. I hadn't thought about that one a lot, but I think that's one of them. But probably the best would be North Dallas 40. The technical consultant for that one was Tom Fears, who coached in the NFL and, of course, is a Hall of Fame player. And Joe Kapp was in a movie called 2 Minute Warning that had good football scenes, and Tom Fears was the football coordinator on that one as well. So that had good football scenes as well. And like I said, there were movies that I thought were just fake. Any Given Sunday, I thought the football scenes in it were ridiculous. It just was unrealistic. So the ones they did in the 70s were just more realistic. They just didn't look realistic, and I thought it was fake.
What do you remember the movie where the fullback pulled out a gun? What? Do you remember that? Maybe you don't remember that. It was like a 90s movie.
Yeah, Bruce Willis was in that one, and it was Damon Wayans. And that was also had ridiculous. It was shot in very low light, and there's just no. It was just that was. I'm sorry, it was just beyond stupid. He was involved in some sort of gambling and bad acting, bad football, bad plot, and it was all about a football player who sold out because he somehow got into some sort of debt or gambling. It was called The Last Boy Scout.
Oh, that's what it was called, yeah. Yeah, when I seen on the trailer when the fullback pulls out a pistol, I'm thinking, yeah, maybe they're not going for realism here on the football field, but so. And okay, did you have any other football movies you wanted to touch on that you thought?
Well, Burt Reynolds was in another one called Semi-Tough, which is a great book, but it was a bad football movie. Burt Reynolds played Billy Billy Clyde Puckett. And the football scenes in it were really bad. By that time, Burt Reynolds had lost his speed, and Chris Christopherson played a wide receiver named Shake Tiller, and he was slow as molasses. And Joe Cap was in that movie as well. He was playing a quarterback just like he did in 2 Minute Warning, and he looked pretty realistic, but it was not a great football movie. Ed Too Tall Jones was in that movie. There were several football players in that one as well, but I don't recommend that as a movie, but I do recommend it as a book. It's interesting. It got a lot of critical acclaim. But boy, you want to talk politically incorrect. That one is over the top. It's you could never get away with writing something like that today, but it does take a serious look at racism and sexism that went on in football locker rooms in that era.
And that just brings me a point back to The Longest Yard. Bernadette Peters was the basic. Well, we had the female at the beginning, which was kind of talk about a scene we wouldn't be able to have today, where Burt Reynolds. It's almost like a second movie when that movie, or it's like a different movie. The first 5 minutes of that movie, where he gets in the car chase, and he kind of gets a little handsy with his girlfriend, and then steals her car, and then dumps it in the water. That kind of feels like a different movie to me. It's more of a car chase movie. And then the only other female, since they're in a prison, it's just Bernadette Peters is like the only other female on the credit sheet. So I think that's kind of a tough role for her. She kind of had to, be the only woman in the movie. So, and the only thing I can say about that opening scene is they show, I'm not a car guy, but they show him driving a manual. And then when he dumps it in the lake, he just hits it like he hits the gear like he's hitting an automatic gear. So that's kind of like a flub they made on the movie there.
Yeah, and it is tough to watch the first few minutes in that domestic violence is ugly, and it was just a sign of the times, and maybe that was part of the downfall of his character. Maybe they just thought they had to show that because he was a broken man, maybe because of how he sold out his team to make money. And I wish they could have maybe developed the reasons that he did that. We're kind of left in a mystery of why he did what he did. He admitted that he did it to the character caretaker later, but we just pick up on with a broken man who's drinking too much and hitting a woman and then stealing her car and getting arrested and going to jail and being forced to play football. So it's kind of not a cliffhanger, but at the beginning, we don't know really what happened.
Yeah, I will give the movie credit. At least, like I said, maybe that's a 5-minute scene, and then they don't go to the courtroom or anything. They just go straight to the prison. I think it was kind of funny. They said he had a 10-month sentence, and when you go to prison, it's always over a year. Otherwise, you go to jail if it's under a year. And I mean, this was supposed to take place in Florida in the 70s, so I don't know if the laws were different, but I thought that was kind of funny that he would go to prison for a 10-month sentence. And then another scene where they're shaving him and they shave half his mustache off. I mean, I'll give him credit for that because you only get one shot. That's a scene you have to get on the first take. It's going to be kind of hard to recreate that. And it was supposed to be demeaning, he's a superstar and they shave him and stuff. But I thought he looked a lot better after he got shaved. I thought he looked a million times better. What'd you think?
Yeah, I like that scene a lot because it was, again, developing the cruelty of the guards. It just showed that they're going to let the inmates know that you're not going to get away with anything. That's the statement I think the movie was really about. Football was more of the vehicle that they showed that the inmates were going to be able to gain a little bit of humanity.
Yeah, exactly. And and then you're talking about the players. I think Ray Nitschke was only retired like maybe 1 year when this movie came out. He had just recently retired, so he was still in really good shape. And he's kind of, and he did good with the comic role. He's the one that goes, when we were talking about the dropkick scene, he goes, "What was that?" Burt Reynolds is like, "Dropkick," and he's like, "What's that worth?" And he's like, 3 points. And so he was really good with the comedic role on that part. I thought.
I agree. I think he did real well. I don't know that Joe Cap did all that great, but he was okay. And I thought Mike Henry did real well.
Yeah, and then Joe Cap, I think maybe they cut some scenes out because he was called the Walking Boss was his name in the movie, and I was like, they didn't really explain that, so maybe he had some scenes that were cut out. Maybe he wasn't a good enough actor to hold all his scenes together, because I just feel like he was kind of underused in the movie, or something like that.
Yeah, that could be, because he was the focus of the ire of the inmates. When they got one of my favorite scenes, or a couple favorite scenes, is when they wanted to take revenge on him, and they got x-rays of the guards, and they saw that this particular guard, or the walking boss, had an injury to this bone or this leg, so they were going to target that and try to injure him. Another one was where they were going to use the brass knuckles to give an extra shot and make sure that they could inflict damage on some of the guards, and using the hand pads and using plaster of Paris to harden it. That I thought played really, really well, because they were going to use this to hit the guards.
Yeah, it kind of reminded me a little bit of this movie came out before Slapshot, and the Slapshot kind of uses the same thing with the where they're foiling up their hands, I guess. Kind of reminded me of that scene a little bit. So this movie came out in 1974. You know, the podcast is called The 70s versus the 80s. Do you think it would be better or worse if they would have released it in 1984? And then who do you think would be a good cast as the lead character in 1984 if they would have released it then?
Well, I don't think it would have been as good in the 1980s. I really do not think there was a character or an actor in the 1980s that could have played the role. In my opinion, it takes a player or an actor who is a former player, who also has a little bit of it has to be a pretty good actor, but it has some size on him. The only actor I can think of who could have played the role would be Mark Harmon. Sometimes he can get away with some Weisenheimer acting. I've seen him play a little bit of comedy. But if you think of an Eddie Murphy, for example, he could be like an Adam Sandler type, but I don't know if he's big enough to play the role. I don't know if Mel Gibson could get away with it either. I think he sometimes can be pretty funny, and he's kind of athletic. So Mark Harmon is the only one, but I don't think he had the star power that Burt Reynolds did. I think maybe the Bernadette Peters character there's several women who could have played that really well and played it pretty funny. I think you could find a lot of football players to play the guards that would have worked out pretty well. But that lead character in the 80s, I just don't think there was an equivalent to Burt Reynolds.
Yeah, you made some good points there. I agree. I don't think there was an equivalent. But I was thinking one actor, he only made one team sports movie. Do you remember the movie Victory, the soccer movie? So that 80s movie with Pele. I think Sylvester Stallone, I agree. It was better made in 74. I think if you would have made it in 84, maybe Sylvester Stallone, of course, would be too short to be a pro quarterback or anything. But I think he could have some of that smart aleck, like where he's saying, caretaker's manager, where he's just kind of looking at the guys and making kind of a smirky face. I think he could have done that pretty good. I don't know if he would have been athletic enough. I don't think he was really athletic enough to play the goalie in Victory, to be honest with you. But so I was thinking him, but I think you brought up better points. Mark Harmon, he was a little bit too much of a good guy, too much of couldn't really play the heel like Burt Reynolds could,
Yeah, and the only reason I picked him is because he kind of had a wry smile about him, and he could definitely throw the football, and he was still in pretty good shape. There were football players who were actors, but by that time in the 80s, they were getting kind of old. Don Meredith, for example, in the 70s might have been able to get away with playing that role, but I don't think he was a good enough actor. And by the 80s, he was just too old to play it, I think. And there was probably other football players that could fill in the roles. Ben Davidson could maybe play the Richard Keel character, kind of a big kind of guy like that. Freddie Dreyer was an actor in the 80s. He might have been able to play one of the guards, but he was kind of tall and thin, so I don't know if there was height restrictions for guards, but he might have been able to pull one of those off. He was certainly a good enough actor. He could have been an inmate as well, and he was in really good shape. He retired in 1981, so in 1984 he was definitely would have been able to do football scenes. So there were players who could have filled in around the stars, but boy, finding a guy like Burt Reynolds in 1984 would be really tough, in my opinion.
So I just thought of this. You want a quarterback that wanted to be an actor. What about if in 1984 Joe Namath would have been retired by then, right? I think.
Yeah.
But I don't know if he wanted to be an actor. He was in what, CNC, that company? Is that the motorcycle movie or something?
Yeah, he did act, and he was still acting in the 80s. I don't think he was really good. He couldn't have carried a role. He had retired in 1977. In 1984, he still would have had a cannon, and he didn't have really good mobility, so I don't know if he could have... He would have been a better athlete than everybody else, even with bad knees, but I don't think he could have played the role. He didn't have the acting chops to pull it off.
Yeah, I agree. I think he barely made it through those 30-second Brute commercials with his acting chops.
If you put that uniform on, you're supposed to be a football player, and you've got to be ready to go all the way. That's just the way I am. I guess that's why I use Brute. I like the smell. I like the way it works, the way it lasts.
Brute by Fabergé. After the game, after anything, Brute goes all the way.
If you're not going to go all the way, man, I mean, why go at all?
But boy, in 1984, Carl Eller could have played one of the heavies. He'd acted a little bit. You know, Merlin Olsen was acting. I don't know if he would have done a role like that. There were guys that it could have been fun if they would have had a kind of a cavalcade of football players. There was a movie called Necessary Roughness in the early 90s where Kathy Ireland was the female kicker. They had a scene where a bunch of football players came from a prison to scrimmage the college football team, and that was pretty fun. They had even had a boxer as one of the football players, Evander Holyfield. But Too Tall Jones was one of them, and Dick Butkus, and quite a few. So that could have been something that could have been exploited in a 1980s football movie with a lot of prisoners. So that could have happened.
I also would have liked to seen Carl Eller be in an 80s movie because so many people say Samuel L. Jackson in Pulp Fiction. I mean, he looked so much like Carl Eller. He had the same hairstyle in that movie, and it looked like him in the face. Of course, not as big as Carl Eller, but it just I would have liked to seen him do maybe read off a couple Samuel L. Jackson lines and see if that would have worked, but maybe not.
Yeah, I've talked to Carl about that. He said friends of his used to call him Samuel L. Eller for a while.
Oh, wow. Okay. I didn't know if he was aware. I suppose people would bring that up to him. That's funny. And then, so just kind of wrapping up on the movie here, Burt Reynolds' brother played number 66, like one of the linemen for the convicts. And he was on the final play, the longest yard play, where the movie gets the name from. He's running alongside Burt Reynolds in slow motion, and it's even in one scene their left feet are hitting, and then their right feet they're like in step unison together. I thought that was kind of an interesting fact. Did you pick up on that at all, John?
I did not. You got me on that one. I did. I followed who the football players were in the movie, and always thought it was interesting that they were really not tremendous football players or well-known stars, but you got me there, man. That's a great tidbit, and next time I watch it, I'm going to be specifically paying attention for that one.
Yeah, because it's like he's playing like a pulling guard, and then and he's running and blocking for Burt Reynolds, and then it's just really weird that they're step and step, like left foot is hitting at the same time, then their right foot hits at the same time. Pretty crazy, and then we've already kind of talked about what scenes wouldn't be able to go today. Do you think the cheerleader scene would still work today? I think it did, because the cheerleaders were there on their own volition. the movie didn't make fun of them. It just put them out there. I mean, they were funny in the sense, but the movie just kind of put them there. Nobody made fun of them on screen. I thought they were great. Do you think that would still work in a movie today?
I think so, because I don't think it was done in a mocking way. I think it's all serious issues can be covered as long as it's not done in a prejudicial way and done to put people down or to be ugly. Certain things exist in prison, and that's one of them. Racism exists in prison. That's just one of the facts, and I think that hand was handled in that movie particularly well. We can't just bury our heads in the sand and watch movies that are 100% politically correct. We have to live in the world, and I think one of the ways to battle things that are ugly is to show them, and it's a way to hold up a mirror to ourselves as a society and say, you know what, that's something that exists, we need to make it better, and one of the ways we make things better is to expose how ugly it might be.
Oh, very well put. I like the way you said that.
Yeah, but like you said, in that particular case, it's just shown it wasn't mean-spirited, and we can still learn from it. Like, yeah, that's something that happens in prison. You've got men dressing in drag and cheering, and that's just part of what they wanted to do. They weren't being forced to do it, and it was funny. I think it's funny today.
Yeah, it's really funny, and it's so weird that, like, I was watching that documentary and they said it was kind of made to be a serious movie. I just can't see it. It's just so much of the comedy is baked into it. And so I ask you, so I know you know a lot about, it sounds like you know a lot about sports movies. What do you think? Does this rank higher? I don't know. This is a prison movie and a football movie. Do you think this ranks higher on your list of best prison movies ever, or do you think it lists higher on best sports movie ever? What would you say?
I think it ranks higher as a sports movie for the reasons we've talked about, the realism, and that they got good athletes in there to play kind of the roles. I think that adds to the authenticity of it. I think there are better prison movies because, boy, prison is such an ugly subject. I mean, Shawshank Redemption is probably the best prison movie, and there's quite a few others. Prison is something that's we don't handle well as a society. For one thing, we put way too many people in prison for things that probably don't need to be in prison. Also, when we put people in prison that don't really, that maybe they could serve in a jail or fines for, bad things happen to them. It's just a dangerous place, and there's predatory things that happen in there, and I think other movies handle that better, and maybe we need to rethink putting people into long prison systems and dangerous for minor drug offenses. I know I'm kind of getting on a soapbox here, but
no, it's fine.
Yeah, but if you, it's to me as somebody who's a Christian and believes in Christ, that he talks about how we should treat prisoners, people who are in prison, and how we should visit and treat them. And I think he does that for a reason. And I think all of us have failed a little bit on how we treat prisoners. And I think movies sometimes is a way to be reminded of how bad it is. These guys go in, they tell their stories. Then they get made movies, and it's supposed to make us change. So I don't think Longest Yard handles the bad things that well. It's kind of makes light of them, not makes light of them, but it doesn't really expose the ugliness the way other movies do. But it's a great football movie.
Yeah, it's a great football movie, and it's kind of. Did you know that? I like the way it ended. The original script called for Burt Reynolds to get shot at the end when he's walking away to get the game ball. I really prefer the ending they came up with, and I think that's part of the reason why it's such a great movie.
I did not know
that.
That
would have been
part.
A bummer? Yeah.
That would have been ridiculous.
Yeah. It was just such a striking scene. I remember seeing that when I was young, and it was just, to see a football player holding a gun, and here we're talking about this twice now, a football player's holding a gun. It was just such a striking image when I was young. I was like, that doesn't look right. It's like, because he's got all his football gear on when he's got the gun up. So we talked about where you think is way up there as a sports movie. Let's say we were opening a drive-in movie theater. Do you think, and we were just playing old movies, do you think this would work well as a double feature with Slapshot, the movie Slapshot that I've already mentioned once today?
Yeah, I think it would. It wouldn't be the movie I would pick because Slapshot is it's a little even more adult than The Longest Yard. There's a little more sexual references and things like that. I think Longest Yard is a little more tame. I would open it up with Bad News Bears and then later showing Longest Yard.
Huh. I didn't even think of Bad News Bears. That's a great choice. I was thinking, they usually had 3 movies at a drive-in, so I was thinking maybe opening it up with Caddyshack, then go Slapshot, then The Longest Yard.
Well, I'm not saying you're wrong. I mean, it's just one of those things. When you kind of mentioned that, I thought, what would be, because Bad News Bears is really funny, but it also has realistic scenes in it. And it's got kind of the character of Buttermaker kind of reminds me of a broken down, older Paul Crewe in a way, guy who tasted the big time, but now he's just an older version. And then in this case, he's teaching kids rather than inmates. I think there's some parallels there.
Oh, very well. Yeah, that's a great choice. Is there anything else, John, you wanted to bring up about that movie or other football movies?
Let's talk about the Shockner character real quick, about how everybody thought what a badass he was. When you look at him now and what it would be compared to is like MMA fighters and stuff, he would be considered nothing. He wasn't doing anything particularly tough compared to today's standards. Do you remember seeing him and you think, oh, what a tough guy?
Yeah.
And now he'd be a wimp.
Well, remember they said he was going to be an expert in karate, and that was the 1970s when karate was actually something. Now, when they talk about the martial arts, MMA, it's jiu-jitsu, and I don't even think karate gets mentioned in the top 10 martial arts anymore for whatever reason. Okay, John, we've gotten to the part of the show where we're breaking down 1970s fighting styles. I think that's going to do it for us. It's been great having you as a guest. Can you please tell the listeners where they can follow you or where they can reach out to you?
Well, there's Pro Football Journal at Blogspot, and also SI.com, Talk of Fame 2. I write articles for them as well. So mostly pro football stuff. We focus on Hall of Fame and older players, the history of the NFL, things that are generally not current. I like following things of the past. That's just more interesting to me.
Yeah, you do a great job of it too. I mean, you got these black and white plays all drawn on your Twitter, and you know who like the pulling guard is, and I'm like, I don't even know how you get that information or how you know that, and you just seem to know who every player, every number is, and it's just amazing.
Well, thank you.
And you're a good follow on Twitter. One of the reasons we had you on today is because I knew you'd be great on the movie, because you just like. You're into movies, you're into that 70s music. I know you do a lot of Bruce Springsteen stuff, and you're always talking about the old movies. I know me and you kind of bonded over the movie The Warriors, which is still a movie I haven't covered on here yet. So, but yeah, so I mean, you're really good. It's not just all football stuff. You do really good of covering stuff in the past. So I really encourage our listeners to check you out. Excellent.
Appreciate it. I like your logo. It's half Bruce Springsteen and half Van Halen. And I'm a big Van Halen guy.
All right. I'm glad you got that. I was hoping people got that. When, I was going to do the half Bruce Springsteen. I was going to do it plaid because I really wanted it to clash. I wanted it to almost hurt your eyes when you looked at it. And I think it still does that a little bit because it clashes a little bit. So that's kind of the look I was going for. All right, John. Well, thank you so much for your time today, and I'll have the links up for our guests so they can track you online. And like to thank everybody for joining me for another episode. I think for the next episode, we have another Crazy Clips episode coming up. And this time all our favorite singer-songwriters are going to be in a go-kart race. Hopefully Phil Collins will stay out of trouble. He's doing a practice lap right now. Let's drop in and see if we can hear him. Ooh, and that's the sound of Phil crashing into the barricades right now. At least he always does it in tune, you know what I mean? Till the next episode, I hope everybody enjoys their Super Bowl Sunday and every Sunday as far as that goes. See ya.
Well, I tried to make it Sunday, but I got so damn depressed that I set my sights on Monday. And I got myself undressed. I ain't ready for the altar, but I do agree there's times when a woman sure can